Good morning, y'all. Happy Tuesday. So today, we're going to be in Luke 12 verses 15 through 21. So, we're going to be talking about the parable of the rich fool. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to read back from verses 13 and 14, which are before this, and are still talking about the beginning of talking about the parable of the rich fool. So verse 13 says, "Someone from the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.'" So, if you don't know what inheritance is normally like the money that you get when someone in your family dies. I'm gonna read the reference down here, and then I'm gonna go to verse 14. Teacher. So it says, someone from the crowd said to him, Teacher, literally rabbi, has been schooled in the law of God. Rabbis were often asked to settle legal disputes. When it says divide inheritance, this is what it means. If sons could not peacefully keep the father's estate together, one could sue for the property to be legally divided. So, inheritance is normally what you get from, like, if your grandpa passes away or if someone in your family passes away. That's normally what, like, an estate or like a think what a little thingy is. So. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm brushing my hair. Okay, anyways, sorry, y'all. Take a break to brush my hair. But verse 14 says, "Friend," he said to him, "who appointed me as a judge or a arbitrator over you." So Jesus is wanting to know who appointed Jesus to be the judge, to be a judge, a arbitrator over the person. So verse 14 said, the reference for verse 14 says, "Friend." So at the beginning it says friend. This is a gruff form of address, somewhat akin to someone today saying, "Listen, mister." Jesus is clearly rebuking the man for his request. Who appointed me a judge over you? Jesus refuses to be used as a pawn for this man's material gain. Jesus effectively becomes the judge over both of them, exposing the motivation of their hearts. I'm gonna say this. Jesus is the judge over. We don't get a judge on what someone does. We don't get a judge on what I believe in. We don't get a judge on any of that. That's Jesus's place to do. We don't have a place in that. So, yes. Sorry, y'all. I had to take a little bit of the sneeze. Anyways, here. Let's get back. So, verse 15 says, He then told them, Watch out and be on guard against all greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. Because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. I feel like this is saying when we're dating someone, when we have when we're married, or when we're engaged or whatever, or we're in a relationship, Jesus should be our first priority. Jesus should be the main focus, and we don't need to focus on all this greed we have in our relationship. Like in our relationship, like if it's a boyfriend-girlfriend type of relationship, we might be asking for this, and that. What we need to ask for is Jesus. We need to put Jesus in our relationships. We don't need to put all this greed and all this stuff, because it'll just pile up to a mess, and then we'll have to take care of it, and it'll just create a mess. We have to keep Jesus in the center of it. We have to be respectful to each other's boundaries, and I'm going to talk about something for a little bit. I'm not going to name drop, because I do not like name dropping. I'm just going to say some things. I had an friendship yesterday. Never mind. I'm not going to say it. I don't feel talking about it right now, because I'll probably cry, and I'm not going to cry. It's all my fault, but we didn't keep the Jesus in center of our relationship. And so we had to end it. Because I was making mistakes I shouldn't have been making. I was lying. And that's not right. And I know it isn't. And I shouldn't have, and I apologize for it. And the person didn't take the apology, and that's fine. It's the end of it, and I'm just gonna move on with life. But something I learned is that we have to pray for the relationship. We have to keep it in the center of God, and we can't just have it like all figured out and we know this, we know that. Like, we have to know that we know it. So. Yes, but we have to keep God in the center of our relationships. That's what I feel like it's saying. So I'm gonna pause this for a minute and then I'll be back. So, I really liked verse 15. That was a really good verse. Okay, now to verse 16. Then he told them a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. So this is the parable. This is the explanation of what the parable of rich fool means. A rich man's land was very productive. That means whenever it says productive, that means the rich man's the fruit was very productive. His fruit was very bituminous, like it was very well grown. And there was a lot of vegetables and crops that were growing really well. I'm going to read the explanation for verse 15 and then go back and read verse 16. Verse 15 says, greed. Jesus pinpoints the real motivating factor behind this appeal for justice. Life. Then a person's happiness and well-being was not often to be determined by what he or she owned. Jesus flatly rejects this as a standard for measuring the worth of one's life. So there's nothing on verse 16, but I'm just going to try to explain it the best I can. Then he told them a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. So this rich man, his land was really productive. When it says productive, it means like there was a lot of good crops. There was a lot of good crops growing in there, and that being really fruitful and growing and just growing. So the crops were really healthy. Luke 12 verse 16. I'm gonna take a break, write those down, and I'll be back. Okay, So that was verse 16. Okay. Verse 17 says, he thought to himself, what should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? What do I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? What do I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? So, the rich man thought to himself, what should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? I'm gonna go to verse 18 because that really didn't have anything right now, so yeah. Verse 18 says, I will do this, he said. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And store all my grain and my goods here. So verse 18. Store all my grain and my goods there. Up to this point in the parable, the listeners would view the man as blessed by God. Even the plan to store the crop for future use could be commended, since the people of the Middle East would periodically suffer from famine. But God redirects the thought. Instead of looking after himself, God reminds the rich man that only God directs the future. The man is to live respecting God, not confident in his own resources. So we shouldn't be living in as it's talking about in verse 15, or verse 18, how the rich man said he was going to do this, and this is where he was going to store his crops. Well, we shouldn't be confident in our resources and what we have and all this nice stuff we have. We need to be confident in God and God alone. That was actually really good. I'm going to write that down because that's something worthy of writing down. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the Bible study today because I have to go get ready for school. But anyways, I hope y'all have a great and amazing rest of your week. Or rest of your week and rest of your day. And I'll talk to you later. Bye. I love y'all.